Sea turtles.
One of our greatest challenges as educators is to find the best way to instruct our students who speak English as a second language. In the state of Minnesota, around 8% of our student population is identified as English learners. In Bloomington, that percentage is around 13%. Both of those numbers have increased 300% in the past 20 years. It is one of our fastest growing student populations.
Beat the Odds analysis is a study that we do to identify the most effective teachers. Then we find out what these Beat the Odds teachers do so that we can multiply the effectiveness of all teachers. This year, we looked at EL students.
When we analyzed the data, we found two classes with the highest value-added scores. Lynn Morales, an 8th grade middle school teacher, and Kit and Whitney, who collaborated in a classroom of first graders. Looking at additional data, we also saw the sites that their schools were at are doing pretty well in comparison to other students in the state.
Our students do so well because it's a group effort here. All of the intervention teachers and support staff are needed to ensure success for our students.
It's not what the EL teachers are doing, it's what the school comes together to teach the EL students.
I know all of you got.
Many people think you need to speak more than one language to instruct English learners. That's not true. What you really need to be able to do is use best practice. Best practice for English learners in language arts is really just best practice for all students. The one difference would be that while it's important for all students to have best practice, for English learners it is non-negotiable.
For students for whom English is their first language, content is difficult in any subject area. So on top of that, you are trying to learn all of the rules of English and the content. That makes it twice as hard for those kids. If someone is determined, what's another way of saying that?
Some of those barriers are things like homonyms, synonyms, unfamiliar language.
Letter placement, the I before E, except after C, or idioms.
One time I used the idiom, "Are you pulling my leg?" And I had 6 students look under the table.
Turn to your partner, share your feature and why.
Best practices for language arts are giving students multiple opportunities to practice using language. They need to be able to talk about what they're learning, write about what they're learning, and have opportunities to read about what they're learning. In addition to having the vocabulary pointed out to them, the language structures pointed out to them, and plenty of visuals to make sure that they comprehend the subject.
On the board, I always have visuals that show, if we're talking about an author, maybe have the author's picture up there. When we're talking about characterization, have the pictures of the different characters up there.
We use dice a lot and we customize them to meet for whatever learning target we're doing, so they can be question dice, they can be informational text feature dice, and it's really a way to engage the first grader. They want to roll the dice, they want to read what's on them, and then they want to share with their partners what they're doing.
We use a variety of manipulatives, such as matching cards to pictures, words. We use stuffed animals to help the students reenact some of the stories that we've been teaching.
You know, the EL teachers here have talked about and stressed is that students need to speak. I always say reading out loud is a skill. Speaking out loud is a skill that everybody needs to have.
Lisa.
I'll say something and then the students will say it back to me. For example, say, "I learned," and then all the students will say, "I learned," and we'll attach a movement to it like tapping our legs.
I learned.
Just put your first and last name and period number 3.
Essays are a big part and writing is a big part of the 8th grade curriculum. For a student who is just learning vocabulary or just learning content, that's a near impossible road. So some of the things that we have done to help with that is starting with sentence frames as their essay, and they are filling in the sentence frames. Keep the expectation high that they still have to write, and help them understand that eventually the goal is to not have a frame, to write it on their own.
Assessment is really important for English learners because we always want to challenge students to be learning just above their proficiency level so that they're gaining language as quickly as possible.
So when students get stuck, we really take the time to collaborate and go back and look at the way we taught it and see how we can teach it differently. So it's using different books, using different graphics, using different movements, really trying everything until they get it.
We're very proud that high numbers of our students graduate from the ESL program. We call that exiting. We have a huge percentage of our students that are very successful in that area.
Both the EL teacher and the classroom teacher are constantly doing check-ins with their students to make sure that they understand the learning target, as well as using the language that's required to meet the learning target. If a student doesn't make progress in the English language program and in their grade level content, then oftentimes they have less motivation as they get older, and when they're in middle and high school, it is much more challenging to get them excited about learning. It's not an exaggeration to say that their futures are at stake.
My hope is that these Beat the Odds findings will encourage other teachers to use the type of effective strategies that were identified in this study. We want a good future for all of our students.